Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Tuesday night edition of USA Hockey Officiating Zoomcasts. My name is Scott Zelkin, and I'll be your host this evening for our very much nuts and boltsy type topic of restraining fouls. We are going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour talking everything there is to talk about in terms of restraining fouls, something that every official working from kids to the pros needs to be able to master. Joining me this evening, we have two of USA Hockey's finest to help cover this topic. Coming to us live from northern Minnesota, Kaylen Erchul. Kaylen has been a USA Hockey official for over a decade now and has been extremely successful throughout her career, as well as being a mainstay on the Minnesota high school hockey front. She works in the NCAA. She works professionally in the NWHL, and also has, as you can tell from her proudly sporting the IIHF shirt, is worked for USA Hockey around the world in the IIHF. So Kaylen, welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Our second panelist, or second guest, is an East Coaster. He was able to dig out from under the snow today to join us. Peter Schlittenhardt. Peter is a graduate of the Officiating Development Program. He spent 4 years living out in the Midwest, as well as some time out east working for the ODP. He's then gone from that to a successful career in college hockey, working in the Hockey East Association, as well as the American Hockey League. He's been with USA Hockey as an official for 17 years, and finally, much like Kaylen, has been afforded the opportunity to work internationally in the IIHF. So Peter, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks again for having me.
Yes. As we do every week with our Zoomcasts, we like to start off. First, we want to welcome everybody in our audience. As we do every week with our Zoomcast, we want to start off with a poll question or two, just to kind of get a sense of, where the audience might be with some of with the topics and some thoughts about our topics, and today being restraining fouls. So what I'm going to do, we're going to spend a couple of minutes. We're going to ask the audience some questions, and these questions will help lead us into our conversation that we're going to have over the next little while. So first one, true or false? Restraining fouls usually occur when the penalized player is being lazy or desperate. True or false? Then restraining fouls can lead to, and this is select all that apply, change in puck possession, unfair scoring opportunities, aggressive retaliation fouls, injuries, reduced game flow. What are the key fundamentals to managing restraining fouls successfully? Rule knowledge, positioning, judgment, consistency, communication, and awareness. And then true or false, consistent enforcement of restraining fouls will ultimately lead to a better game. So we're going to let you guys spend a little bit of time. The votes are coming in now. And once we get done with that, I'll share it with you, and then we'll start talking. Okay, so as we can see, a couple of things. True or false, restraining fouls usually occur when the penalized player is lazy or desperate. So the majority of you, 85% of you, said true, while 15% of you said false. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into things, and you could certainly say that in a lot of cases they might be lazy or desperate, but there are some cases where maybe not so much. But I'd say those of you that came in with the true answer probably hit the nail on the head. And then when we talk about restraining fouls can lead to, and you know what, the majority of you selected all of them. And you know what, that's pretty true. Restraining fouls can lead to all of these things: change in puck possession, unfair scoring opportunities, aggressive retaliation fouls, injuries, and reduced game flow. Then when we're talking about what are the key fundamentals to managing restraining fouls selectively, 100% of you said rule knowledge and positioning. 96% of you said judgment. And then we're still in the 80s and 90s with consistency, communication, and awareness. And that's absolutely correct. And then finally, consistent enforcement of restraining fouls will ultimately lead to a better game. And 96% of you said true. And that would be the case as well. So if we can, and this is a really good place to kind of lead into our discussion here, if we can consistently enforce restraining fouls and call those penalties on a regular basis, we're going to have the ability to have a better hockey game. And we've done Zoomcasts in the past, guys, on aggressive fouls and things like that, and game management and communication. And ultimately, another key component is managing restraining fouls. And when we're talking about restraining fouls, right, Kaylen and Peter, we're talking about hooking, holding, tripping, interference. And when hooking, holding, tripping, or interference occur, and there may be some other things we're talking about, you know, Peter, when I talk about those sorts of penalties, what comes to mind when you're preparing for a game, when you think about restraining fouls? What's going through your mind when you think about this and you prepare?
Especially from the questions before, consistency, I think is key. Because we've all been in games where coaches would always say like, oh, there's two teams out here. So making sure that if we're holding one team to a level, a standard that we have for hooking, holding, tripping, or interference, that we're holding that other team accountable as well. And where you're really going to make yourself known is when no one really, it's okay to call that first penalty, that hooking penalty, but it's the follow-up one to see where that level at, especially if it's on the other team. That's how you're going to be able to proceed through that game pretty smoothly, knowing that the coaches are going to understand where your standard is, holding one team accountable for these restraining fouls, but then holding the other team accountable at the same level, not being like, oh, that was kind of a hook, but not really. No, if it was a hook on one team, it's got to be a hook on the other team, and maintaining that consistency portion to it. Also, and I know, and I want to definitely give Kaylen a chance to chime in as well, but being able to look at, change in possession. So you have a puck carrier, he gets grabbed, hooked, and all of a sudden they're not able to make the play that they were, allowed the opportunity to make. That's a restraining foul infraction. So between consistency and change in possession, or change in the ability for that player to make a play, those are the things that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with that. Having that standard is huge when you start the game. Keeping your standard and knowing, I've called this on a team, I got to keep that standard up. And a big thing with it is communicating before the game, even communicating with your partner what you typically, I'm looking for this, or this is something I look on the ice. Having that communication before, just to have a partnership, also is big, especially depending on the type of game you're working. Having that communication in the locker room before can help work as a team too, so you know that you're kind of on the same page. Another thing that I like to keep aware during the game is my positioning. I know one of the questions talked about positioning in there, and for me, making sure I'm in the right position gives me the best opportunity to see the play at its fullest. If I'm behind play, I might not see the play as I should, or if I'm getting out of my positioning in the triangle, I might not see the play like I could if I was in the right positioning.
Right. And so really, we've talked about a lot of that stuff. And what Peter was mentioning is, like aggressive fouls, right? These restraining fouls, they're going to set the kind of tone of the game that's going to be played, right, Kaylen? I mean, if you're going to choose not to call restraining fouls, or you're not going to follow the standard that USA Hockey prescribes, that's going to set a tone no different than calling, the standard correctly, or over calling the game, right? You're setting a tone, right, Kaylen?
Yeah, absolutely. If you, the types of calls you make are just as important as the types of non-calls you make. So making sure that your standard is following everything is going to make the game go a lot smoother for you, and kind of give an idea to the coaches and the players of what to expect for this game.
Right. And Peter, you talked about, but, what you see over my shoulder here or next to me, we're looking at some of these things, right? We're looking at loss of scoring opportunity, change of position or possession, I'm sorry, and then limiting skill. All of those factor in to, when we're thinking about restraining fouls. Those are the things we're thinking about, right? As to whether or not to call restraining fouls, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're gonna watch a couple of great examples of this in a second. But I think it's important that as much as we want to maintain the standard, and USA Hockey set a great standard of play. They sent out great videos during the seminars that we can all watch and refer to when it comes to the standard. But not over calling the game and not always looking for these kinds of restraining fouls, I think is important. That not every hook may be a hook, or not every clutch and grab it may be a 2-minute holding penalty. We're going to see some great examples of this in a couple of minutes. But just making sure that you allow the penalties to come to you, we all watch hockey on TV, we all watch the NHL, and we all say like, oh, that was a hook. And why is that? Chances are because a very highly skilled player lost possession of the puck, couldn't take a shot on net, couldn't make a pass to his teammate. So when we think of the standard and we think of these restraining fouls, we want to make sure that we're making sure that these players can make that play when they have possession and control of the puck. And if they're taking away that opportunity, that's when we can raise our arm for a penalty, especially when it comes to restraining fouls.
Right. And Kaylen, I mean, this translates back to, Peter's just talking about, okay, you see this at the NHL level or at the college level, but if you're working, whether it's high school or you're out working a 12U game, these things we were talking about, loss of scoring opportunities, change of possessions, or limiting skill, that translates really well at the grassroots level too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of goes in all levels. You're going to see even in those 12U games, if a player gets hooked right in the gloves, you're going to see that their arm is moving. They can't do what they should be able to do. It's a really obvious call in some of those situations, but also looking for some that might not be as obvious. You get some of those interference where, it's limiting where they can go. It might not be a limiting of a scoring opportunity, particularly in some of those cases, but limiting where they should be able to go in order to get that possession of the puck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's, as they like to say, let's go to the tape. So let's look at a couple of examples here, and we'll let you guys kind of comment on what you see. So let's watch this play here and see what we see and what happens.
The puck is Jack Malone around the cage, getting harassed by Durbin. He'll get tripped up, and heading toward the bench is going to be Christian Stover. But there.
All right, so let's show it one more time for our audience.
And coming away with the puck is Jack Malone around the cage, getting harassed by Durbin. He'll get tripped up, and heading toward the bench is going to be Christian Stover. But there. Okay,
so Kaylen. The audience, or the announcer says he's getting tripped up. We're not so sure that's what exactly happens here, but what are we seeing here, and what are we, what's kind of our benchmark, or what do we see on this play?
Yeah, so coming behind the net, there was a little bit of some contact. The stick was getting up into that arm area, and I really liked at that point where, the arm for the referee wasn't up yet, but as he started to pivot, the stick got a little bit higher and was able to give enough of a tug to make him lose possession of the puck, lose control of his body. And ultimately at that point, I agree. It was, definitely a hook in my standard. And I think in most of ours, that would be the case. I really liked the beginning though, where the referee was letting the play kind of develop, and, there might've been some hooking motion behind the net, but it wasn't at that point, it wasn't enough to really limit the whole play itself. But in the end, I really like that call of a 2-minute, and I'm assuming that he called it for a hook on that one.
For sure. That's the kind of call Peter Schlittenhardt would make years ago when he was working for me. But you're right, Kaylen. I mean, they're battling hard. There's nothing there until there is something there, right, Peter?
Absolutely. And I think the key word here too, as Kaylen mentioned, is consequence. Kaylen mentioned that she liked that the referee's arm didn't initially bite on the first hook or a little grab there behind the net because they're battling, right? So if we're looking for a penalty, which some of us, we may get caught doing. If we're looking for a penalty, we probably call that first one, right? So we probably call that holding because he has that free hand on him or the stick already there in the midsection. But at the end of the day, there's no consequence. Not until the player really gets that stick in there, gets the back arm and takes the player off the puck. Now we have a change of possession. We have a big consequence, and that was what warranted the 2-minute penalty. So that was great.
Perfect. Yep. All right. So now what do we see here? And we're going to play this. You're going to see the play and then a slow motion replay. Okay. Now our referee doesn't think this is a penalty. However, upon further review, I think we see an interference penalty here. And when we see that, Peter, what are you seeing when you see this play? And let's talk about maybe why the referee isn't calling this penalty. What could we do better? And we'll play it one more time. What could we do better to see this play?
So the first thing I noticed is what Kaylen mentioned earlier about being in proper position to make sure we're seeing the entire play. I think everyone here on the call, I know we all can't interact, but I think we would all agree that the referee doesn't have a great sight line of this infraction, looking through the net, looking through the goaltender. However, one thing I noticed as well about this referee is that he's gliding into the zone. We have the puck is deep below the goal line, and we're gliding flat-footed to the goal line. We need to make sure that we're hustling to that goal line so that we can anticipate play a little bit better, and we can already be in the corner behind the goal line to where we could see, I think it's number 13, pick off number 5 Blue's ability to make a defensive play on that red 17 player.
All right. And that's, and what does he do? And of course, here I tried to get fancy with my highlighter. And because of that, now I don't know how to get it to play. So we'll go back. Here we go. Did we do this right? No. The player picks him off into the net, right, Kaylen?
Yeah, so he kind of pinches him out so that he can't go and make that next play against the 17 red. So he closes off his gap, has no intention to play the puck. He's just going to remove Blue from having an opportunity to go up against 17 red. So that little shove might not seem like a lot, but it's enough to limit him from being able to go and make that play and remove him kind of from where he should have been without that, interference into the net.
Right. And so as referees or as officials, sometimes we want to recognize when players are using opponents or the objects on the ice, which would be the net in this case, to help them run interference. So it's not really of a change of possession here. That's not a scoring opportunity. But you could say it's really kind of limiting skill. It's limiting the skill of the Blue player to effectively cover his opponent or play the puck, right?
And I think the other thing here too is with restraining fouls is, as I would phrase it, gaining an unfair advantage. By that Blue player not being able to make a play on the puck carrier, that red is gaining an unfair advantage as a result of an interference infraction.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great example or a great explanation. One thing for our audience, as you're watching this, we are going to have some time at the end for some questions, but you do have a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, as well as a chat feature. And that is where we would like you to throw in any questions or any comments as we're working our way through this. All right. So now the next one, let's see what happens in this clip. Okay. So what do we see here, Kaylen?
Yeah, I'd say one thing to look at here is where White has his arms. So if you see here, at first they're kind of tied up, but he has a 2-arm grab coming into the boards, which is really limiting the Dark from playing the puck. Sometimes if you have that one hand and it's kind of doing a little bit and both are going and battling, but when you see that 2-hand wrap, it kind of prevents the player from doing any movement of the puck at all.
Right. So Pete, one term we use a lot is, other than we wish the operator of the videos knew what he was doing here, is use of the free hand, right? And,
Yeah.
and Kaylen talked about a two-hand grab and stuff, but if you look right here, what do we see with that white player's arm, right? That's the free hand. And that's a little bit of a good tip for us as officials to look for, right?
Yes. Once a player has one hand on the stick, that raises my little antenna here, just making sure I keep a quick eye on what that player is doing with the free hand. I know other areas around the country, and even in I know USA hockey too, especially with that pinning. I know pinning is more of encouraged to kind of prevent that hitting from behind. I think that's what this player is trying to do here, but obviously it's a bit much. So making sure that we know the difference between making a pin, making that play, but then having to release that player because that player, he's going to obviously lose his puck battle. 16, the dark player is in a great position to get that puck. So he's got to be able to watch that free hand, make his play, but then he's got to release him. Otherwise, in this scenario, it'd be holding.
Right. And I'm not going to start playing too much with the video because we've got it right where we want it. But, where you're talking about that pinning too, Peter and Kaylen, is that that's a technique that is taught and coached a lot to avoid hitting somebody from behind for that dangerous play. So some coaches might call it a catch and release. Some coaches might call a pin. But the big difference here is, okay, if they're going into the end zone or end wall, you can pin them for a second, but the minute that player starts to try and move like he does here to get away and he gets restrained and he's not able to show his skill, that's when we want to penalize that player.
Yep,
right?
He's got to release there. Has to release.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so next one. We're going to find, we wanted to get to this for a while, our producers have. Now we've got this one. Let's see what we get here, right?
Whoops.
Okay, Kaylen, this would be a loss of scoring opportunity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously it took him down. It removed the play that he had, and he was going to the net pretty good. And that tug right on that inside of that left arm completely impeded him from, having a chance to score, make a move on the goalie, and ultimately, brought him down, which loses his scoring opportunity, and the play just kind of ends at that point for him.
Right. And now, since, you've been talking quite a bit about positioning and making sure we're in good position, here we're doing the 4 official system. And so we've got our referee that's in pretty good position, right? You're comfortable with where this referee is for this play?
Yeah, I really like where he is. He has a great sight line. He's right there, a little bit above the play, which is nice. He's not directly even, which is good, because if you're a little ahead of the play, you're able to kind of get the whole picture, compared to if he was even, he might not be able to see exactly where that stick is. And I think he has a pretty good right there. It's getting a little bit closer, but he can kind of see the play starting, right there. It has a great view at it, I think.
Right. And now, Peter, if you're in the 3 official system and if you're in the 3 official system and you're trailing the play, what are you looking at if you're way back here, right? Well, first off, you got to be skating hard, but what are your thoughts in the 3 official system?
So I'm watching 55 stick and where it's coming, because you can see if a player is coming parallel, coming across the body there. If he's coming across the body, especially in this scenario, he's preventing that player from being able to make that scoring opportunity.
Yeah. And so we had a comment in the chat here. Would we want to call a penalty shot on this one?
You have an argument for it, because you have 0 players other than the goalkeeper. But to me, him gaining possession and control, I like the 2-minute minor here. It wasn't enough of a complete loss of scoring opportunity, because remember, the purpose of penalties is to restore a scoring opportunity here. Do I think he earned the right for a full-blown penalty shot breakaway? No, I think that the player just got beat real quick and he's just sticking a stick in there just to kind of regain him. But you do have the argument. Just remember what I said before, be consistent. If you're gonna you take a snapshot of that picture of that play in your brain, and if you see it later, then you got to be consistent. To me, that's a little tough to be consistent with throughout the game. That's right. Opinion.
Yeah, and ultimately we want to see that player be a little more free and clear. And I know John likes that explanation, so I'm going to agree with John. That's a really good explanation there, Peter.
Yeah, I kind of add to that. I agree with Peter, and I just don't think there's enough separation between the two players at that point either. And if you look, Dark at that point, when the play started, he only had one hand on the puck. He probably wasn't going to get a great opportunity. He did lose an opportunity, but from where it started, I don't think he had enough to lose that complete scoring chance that I would like to call for a penalty shot. For me, a penalty shot's gotta really earn it. And I think this one was a great minor call, but a penalty shot might have just been a little not as strong as I would like.
No, for sure. No, that's great. So thank you for that. So now let's talk a little bit about faceoffs, right? So faceoffs, they happen in 60-minute hockey games. You can have 40 to 70 faceoffs in a game. And there are going to be times, that's an area quite a bit where we could run into some restraining fouls, right? Kaylen, as a referee, what are you thinking about when you're lining up and a faceoff is occurring in the end zone that one of your partners is conducting?
Yeah, so a big thing, if I'm the outside official, if we're talking in a 2 official system, I'm watching behind my partner, seeing if anything is happening behind. Also watching in front of him too, because he's only going to get to see so much when he or she dropping the puck. So checking to see if there is any extra hook, is there any extra hold or holding the opponent from going towards the puck. Looking for those little tie-ups that might not be two-sided. It might be one person restraining the other, but also making sure to see, is this just a battle? Is it two people battling? Because you can see those a lot at the face-offs where both are coming in and they're tied up, but just making sure that one isn't overpowering the other or getting an unfair advantage.
And what about you, Pete? When you're working, what are you thinking about? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I know we've all played the game, and we have to have a little hockey IQ on face-offs, and we all know that what our coaches have taught us on a face-off type play, like wingers are going to the D, and that as the offensive team and they lose the face-off, they're probably trying to go to the corner to go get the puck, and watching those picks take place. Normally they take place, I would say, on the winger side. So just making sure that the defensive team has an opportunity to go play the D, and then the offensive team, if they lose the faceoff, have an opportunity to at least try and get the puck, and they're not being picked off in either scenario.
No, exactly. So let's take a look here. We've got another good example off of a faceoff, and let's see what happens on this one.
There's a turnover. It looks like they're going to be railing Caulfield in. As he shot the puck, he went wide as a penalty coming to Team USA. Caulfield, his 20th birthday.
So this is live from the Edmonton bubble.
USA 12, minor penalty, interference. So the Slovaks did the first power play of the game.
And we'll see a replay here.
Just 2 for 13 on the power play. Is Nate Lehman not too pumped and kind of looking for an explanation?
So if he's looking for an explanation, Kaylen, what's his explanation? What are we giving him here?
Well, there's definitely a penalty there. If you see him coming in, he's going right under the armpit, and sometimes you can get away with it. But with this play, he got under the armpit and twisted him around, causing him not to be able to make any play with the puck. You can see right where he's got that contact under the arm. It's impeding him from making any type of play. It might have been tough to see, if he hadn't fallen down, maybe it wouldn't have been as easy to see, but you can see it takes him completely out of the opportunity to make any type of play off that face-off.
Right. And Peter, so when the puck goes down, just like you were talking about, who wins the draw? Right? The puck goes back to, and this is a set play. So if we look at this, and once again, at the grassroots level, there are still going to be teams that might run set plays, but this is a set play. If you watch Cole Caulfield, number 13, on the far boards here, he's coming up this way to pick the puck. This winger is trying to get out here, and he steps right in front of him, right?
Yeah. So this is exactly what I mentioned before is, because in theory, right, if that winger is going to the D, just like we're all taught, he's still going to be able to make a play on Cole Caulfield in this scenario. But that strong side winger there, he prevents him from being able to do that. And, you know, what I think about in that first contact, like that first contact is okay, because I know I mentioned before that he's preventing him. We can probably have a penalty on almost every face-off if we were to really have a tight standard in this kind of thing. The problem becomes is when he keeps his hand there and then he really restrains him. Like this is when it's a penalty, when that arm is wrapped around his shoulder and now he's trying to move in a desired direction and now he can't. So, you know, I don't want anyone on this call thinking that the second there's contact on a face-off, there needs to be a penalty. There's contact on every face-off. So, you know, just make sure you're looking for scenarios where a team is gaining an unfair advantage. And especially with Cole Caulfield, we all know the kind of goal scorer he was, especially in this tournament. That's a high scoring opportunity for him gained unfairly because of his teammate.
Right. Okay. And Kaylen, Mr. Referee down here is not doing anything, right? Are we concerned about that? Because we know the other referee out at the blue line is making the call. How would you break that down for our audience in terms of who's watching what areas of responsibility and things like that?
You know, on this one, that, you know, you're right, that ref is kind of just in his stationary spot, and it's gonna come down to who has the best angle of it. And I think that, you know, this could be one that both could have their arms up depending on what they are looking at. But it does look like that outside guy might have a little bit better of a view, especially with that end result in the opening up, where the down low guy, he might be partially blocked out by white in front of the net, or, you know, I can't really see exactly what he's looking at in this clip. But either or, it would be a great call to put the arm up. I do think the outside ref might have a little bit better view in the end phase of this video. But that is one that we definitely need to catch on the face-off, because the intent was not to go play the puck for USA. His intent wasn't to play the puck; it was to impede White from having a chance at his player.
Right, and that's something, areas of responsibility, Peter, you're going to talk about as a group of officials before the game. And so maybe those group of officials talked about how on the face-off, the down low referee was going to stay with the puck, and the outside referee was going to be looking for any restraining fouls or any obstruction of players trying to get to the point, right?
Yeah, you know, just looking at the field of vision and who's able to see this. If you look at that down low referee, he's looking through a couple of players. He's got one white body there, and then he's got a whole cluster of players on the face-off dot. Doesn't really have the best sight line. So R2 definitely has a more premier sight line to make that call.
All right, and so Kaylen, what advice would you give to any of our officials where, you know, when they're only working in the 3 official system? How do you pick this stuff up?
Yeah, so I guess it depends. I know for me, I like to be a little bit closer to the net if I can at times. So that might also help with some of the sight lines. You might get a better view inside when you're looking at that face-off, making sure to look at the whole picture and not be so puck focused. I know it's really hard sometimes with the 3 official system. The ref is the one making those calls and making sure that you see the whole picture and aren't focused just on the puck, because there is a little bit more to it than, you know, the puck carrier or where the puck is going at the time.
No, for sure. And so, you know, we've shown some examples of some hooks, some holds, some trips, some interference that are kind of our pillars of limiting skill, scoring opportunities, change of possessions, and things like this. Are these absolutes? Are we all, you know, and once again, Peter, and you talked about this a little bit, are we always calling them, or are there times that maybe we're going to ignore some of these? And I know this is something, you know, we want to be careful with what we talk about, but ultimately, are there times when maybe we don't need to call some of these things?
Yeah. And, you know, not every hook is a hook. Not every trip is a trip. You know, I'm looking at, you know, areas of the ice. Some of the examples we saw in our previous videos, you know, we saw prime scoring opportunities, the center of the ice. You didn't see too many calls along the boards, or, you know, I know we had the one obvious hook behind the net, which was in and of itself that obvious. However, you know, let's say, for example, that in that particular video, that player had a teammate there and that teammate picked up the puck. You know, as I said before, was there an unfair advantage gained? Maybe not, because that team didn't lose possession of the puck, or maybe that player didn't lose a scoring opportunity. Was the infraction there? Absolutely. But was there an unfair advantage gained, a loss of possession? If the answer is no, then we have maybe an opportunity to have a great no call in that scenario, which will show a little bit of hockey sense as well.
And we can verbalize as well, Kaylen. We can talk to the players. We can maybe communicate with the coaches if there's times and you could say, look, you're crossing the line, or you're getting awful close to that line. And it also talks about, setting the standard early in the game for what sort of game you're going to have the rest of the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things I really like to verbalize in respect to the players is when you have those ones on the boards. There's that example of that hold, the two hands getting on. It started out with that one hand. If you're in good position, you're looking at the play, you can talk with the players. You can say, hey, 15 white, I see you, or watch the hands. You can talk them through, and sometimes you're able to get their attention before it does get to a certain point. And you're kind of able to explain, and let them know you're there, and they can kind of get an idea that if they keep going, they might get that arm up in the air.
Well, for sure. So let's take a look at this play here, and let's see if this is one where we want to be calling it, or maybe we can. This isn't an absolute.
And pass over the line, taken away. Back comes Coons.
So we're going to go back. You don't need to see the rest of the play. Green Bay doesn't score.
And pass over the line, taken away.
So to talk about what we talked about in some of our questions, was this player being lazy? When he reaches out his stick, he kind of gets beat. He puts his stick in his feet. He definitely takes the Green Bay player down and trips him, but is this a penalty we want to call? Peter, no? You're shaking your head?
Nope. This one is a play on scenario for me. The Green Bay team, they're doing their breakout. They did their regroup just like we all do in practice, and they're moving up ice with the puck. I don't think that trip was a misstep on the Green Bay part. They entered the zone as if they normally would have. Nothing changed as a result of that play. So I'm keeping my arm down for that particular trip.
And Kaylen, would you agree?
I agree 100%. With that, there wasn't any, the change in possession. Yeah, but he was going intended for that pass. If we were calling, some of those, if we called that penalty, it could make for a long game with those trips. You do have a couple of those here and there that, you would have to be consistent with your call. Another thing to watch is I think White was also trying to transition up the ice. I don't know if he fully intended, to make that little extra into the skates. So kind of the intent, I don't know if it was fully there. And I think it would just have made kind of a hard standard to keep the rest of the game.
Right. And that's that's the thing, that's the point we're trying to get across with this one is, ultimately you have to, as a good official, if you're able to read the play and understand a little bit what's going on. Now, if Green Bay is going up the ice in a 3-on-1 and the U.S. player trips that player, and now it turns a 3-on-1 into a 3-on-2, or I'm sorry, a 2-on-1, we may want to call that because it changes the whole dynamic of the play. And that becomes a little more challenging. And at the grassroots level, like you said, Kaylen, there's going to be times where if you're calling these, you're going to be there all night, and the Zamboni's going to come on the ice halfway through the third period because it's time for the next group, right? So, they aren't always absolutes, but we want to be consistent, like you talked about, right, Peter?
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the challenging parts that I think, especially at the grassroots level, is dealing with player emotions and coaches' emotions. And I mean, we've all been in this scenario where the coach is like, a trip's a trip no matter what. And if you're able to go over there and say, hey, coach, I see your point. I saw the play. He was able to regain possession of the puck. You guys entered the zone, no issue. I didn't see a need for that infraction. And then if they throw that line at you, a trip's a trip no matter what, you can throw it back in their face in terms of saying that, you know what, I don't think you would want me to be consistent both ways with that call. And then that should instantly take care of it, because that shows the coach that, one, I think the biggest issue is they think that we missed it, right? How many times are we looking at a play and we see a play happen, a hook, a trip, and the coach is like, you missed it. And you're like, no, I saw it. I just didn't think it was a penalty. It shows that your knowledge, it shows you're engaged in the game. It shows that you saw the play, you read it a certain way, you made a decision, and that you're going to be consistent with it moving forward. I would say that that's probably one of the challenging parts of letting a play like that go, that we can be confident in as officials.
Right. And Kaylen, if a coach says to you, that's a trip, we might say to him, well, I can understand how you'd see it from your angle, but from my position, that's not a penalty. I think you want me to call all night long because it'll go both ways and we could be here a long time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being confident in explaining what you saw, remembering, you don't want to say, I think, or well, maybe. You want to be confident in what you say. Even if you might think in the back of your mind, oh, could I have called that? You don't want to display it all the time to the coach. Be confident in what you saw and explain it because, ultimately it didn't change anything in that play. They were able to go rush up and, he wouldn't want it the other way either. So just being confident in how you talk and explain to the coach will help you in the end too.
No, for sure. And I say this every time I'm hosting one of these. These are topics we've talked about in other Zoomcasts. So one of our first 5 or 6 topics was communication with coaches and communication with teams. And I would encourage everybody in our audience to go take a look because I think there's some great tips on how to have those conversations from some pretty high level as well as outstanding tier 1 youth level coaches. So now, and if you were paying attention a second ago, you saw I flip slides. Let's talk about penalty shots. We had a question about one a little earlier. Here's a couple of examples of some plays that might be penalty shot / optional minor penalties. So let's see what we see here.
Dylan spins off a check, far corner, battling for it. Ty now has it up the far wall. Jimmy Glenn to the point, kicked away by Waterloo, and Montgomery off to the races, shorthanded. Montgomery, far circle, diving poke by Kaiser. Oh, and they'll call a penalty. They'll call a penalty shot.
Yes, they will. Kaylen, we like this call?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of met all criteria. Obviously, it was that minor for a trip. But if you look at he's from behind or diagonally from behind, he's losing that complete scoring opportunity, not even able to get, partially of a shot off. And I think that is a great standard for a penalty shot there.
Yeah, that's a penalty shot every day of the week for you, Peter, right?
Yeah. So the, Kaylen just said it met all criteria, and there's an acronym I've learned from one of my mentors when I was a youth official as well. It's PROOF, PROOF. And, it's possession and control of the puck. The player clearly has that. Loss of a reasonable scoring opportunity, definitely there. He's over the defending blue line and got 0 players to pass other than the goalkeeper, and then fouled from behind. So that acronym is always in my mind when I'm considering a penalty shot in that scenario. So PROOF, PROOF.
And one of the other things I like about this play a lot is our referee Schlittenhardt, right? Mr. Referee is in really good position, and that's one of the challenges, not one of the challenges, one of the keys to being able to make this call is you've got to be in as good a position as you possibly can. We also have the linesman going into cover, so those things from a fundamental standpoint are pretty important. So let's and John says penalty shot is the most exciting play in hockey, and it sure is. So, and we shouldn't be afraid to call it. So let's watch this one. Let's see what happens here. Okay. This one, and this is a little trickier, but I'm going to tell you, this is a penalty shot as well. So why are we calling a penalty shot here, even though we're getting a good scoring opportunity? Kaylen, what would you say to our audience on why we're going to call a penalty shot on this one?
Yeah, so for this one, this still does meet all that proof criteria, and I really like that acronym. I'm going to remember to keep that that in my mind too, or for younger officials when working with them. But he might have gotten a scoring opportunity, but it's nothing like what they were going to get. I mean, he would have had at least 15 more feet to make a play, and it's way from behind. I mean, that's a good 2 strides. He would have had such a good opportunity and more space between compared to what he ended up getting, even though it was still an okay opportunity.
And Pete, I will tell you, when this play happened, and we had this play a couple of weeks ago, there was some discussion among all of the big muckety mucks at USA Hockey that the player in blue here doesn't have possession of the puck. And so does it meet that criteria?
I saw that, and I could definitely see why that discussion takes place. And I know in some other rule books, it actually does identify even as a player who would have gained possession of the puck, which we can all agree. I think Blue was clearly the front runner to get this puck, and I don't think anyone in any building, any league would disagree with that. But just to me, this is still a penalty shot. I could see where that would be said, but to me, that's still enough control of the puck to still award a penalty shot in this scenario.
And I think that's the key, right? He's got this player has pushed the puck forward, and we can assume that without that hook, the puck isn't so far in front of him that he's never going to get to it again. If that hook doesn't pull him back like he gets pulled back, he's getting that puck. And he's moving forward. So these are two really good examples. And like you talked about, right? We want to be able to restore the scoring opportunity that they had. And Kaylen, like you said, the scoring opportunity is going to be totally different if that hook doesn't happen. So now, can restraining fouls be aggressive? Peter, are there such things as aggressive restraining fouls?
Yeah, absolutely. I know one of the restraining fouls that we were saying before, holding, right? There's another part of the rule there's another paragraph under holding on grabbing face masks. That's an area where it could a restraining foul could get aggressive. Another one, which is unfortunately creeping into the game more and more, is slew footing, which is under the tripping area. So there are plenty of areas where restraining fouls can get very aggressive and very violent and very dangerous.
No, for sure. Kaylen, anything you want to add to that, or in terms of aggressiveness, in terms of restraining fouls?
No, I agree with both of those completely. Those are ones that, especially that slew foot, that is a very aggressive penalty and doesn't really have any right or need to be in the hockey game itself. It's not, doing anything for the game, but causing potential injury, and it's just a really dangerous call.
So let's see an example of a slew foot.
Oof.
So talented, but here's the penalty. Arthur Kaliev gets dumped in front of the net.
So what about this makes this a slew foot, or why is this? So this is tripping. It's under the tripping rule. But what about this makes this a slew foot, and why is it so dangerous?
So there's two components to me that make this a slew foot. One is having your leg planted behind the player in this scenario, and the other one is if we're all watching White's elbow, is his elbow going back. So you have his knee coming forward, his leg coming forward, and his elbow going back, and that kind of one motion there is what makes this a slew foot for me. And what makes it extremely dangerous is look how this player falls. Could we all imagine if he lands on his head there? It's something that we're all unexpected. Once again, we've all skated, right? We know how easy it is if you just tap the back of your skates, right? We're all off balance, which makes this extremely dangerous that we can't protect ourselves in this infraction.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's maybe one of the classic examples of a restraining foul that can result in an injury or can be dangerous. And consequently, that's, those are things that we're going to have to look at. Now, Kaylen, you spend a lot of time working high levels of women's hockey and as well as lower level women's hockey or grassroots level. Are there any differences specific to the women's game that we ought to talk about when it comes to restraining fouls?
Yeah, I think there is some differences, a lot with the hooking. In the men's game or boys game, as you're getting higher up, there is that body checking for the separation of the puck, where in the women's game and girls game, there isn't that. A lot of the stick does get used, and being able to to identify if it's truly a hook and affecting the play, or is it just using the stick a little bit? Obviously, you want to try to get those hooks and have the least amount of stick work possible, but that just doesn't always happen. So making sure you check to see, is it actually a loss of opportunity? Was the stick, just right on the, kind of right below the hands, but not affecting the hands? But those hooks in the women's and girls games tend to be, you got to have those strong calls, because if you start with kind of a smaller hook, with the women's or girls game, you're using your stick a lot more than a men's game or boys game, where they're able to use their body to separate from the puck.
No, that's good. And I think that's really good information for those of you out in the audience that are working women's hockey. You do have to recognize that there are going to be some subtle differences. And there, like you said, there's also differences just within the rule book in general. Body checking is one really good example. So that's really helpful. I've got a good question here from somebody in our audience. And the question is, what if players don't respond to the calls you're making? What if you've been calling restraining foul after restraining foul and they don't respond? What are you going to do as an official? And I'll let either one of you, I'll kind of throw this out to both of you. What are you going to do? How do we help change that and get back to a better game?
One thing I'd say is, if you can, grab a captain from each team, or, somebody even going to the coaches and giving, hey, we're starting to use the stick a little more than I'd like. Can we talk to the players about reining it in a little bit? Giving them an idea that, hey, we've been calling this all game. You guys know what the standard is. Let's try to watch your stick, or watch what you're doing holding in the corners. So being able to communicate with the players, and even if it's just taking a captain or talking to the coach at the start of a period, or if you can quickly catch them, going down without having to be confrontational, just saying, hey, I want your kids to keep playing, but if we keep with the sticks moving, we're going to have to keep calling these penalties.
Peter?
And then what's important is, after you do something like that, you need to make sure that you follow it up with living up to your promise there, that if you're saying, hey, sticks are creeping up, if we keep going in this direction, I'm gonna start calling penalties. Well, then you need to start calling penalties. Because if you do have that conversation and you don't, it's actually, I would say, probably twice as worse as if you didn't even go over there to communicate penalties at all. But it's also important too that, if there is not responding, that at some point they're going to get sick of taking penalties, and you got to maintain your standard, and you got to be consistent. And we all have those games that we all take part in where, it feels like you're never going to get out of it. And, you got to make sure that we're there to enforce the rules, that those types of games do happen, and we need to maintain our standard and be consistent. And if we have an opportunity to communicate, please do, and live up to it.
And what happens if, another good question, what happens if we miss a call? What happens if we know we've missed a trip? We know we've missed, a pick into the net. One of these calls we know we missed. How do we bounce back? What do we do?
Well, there's a couple different things you can do, depending on and how the game is going, gauging how it's feeling. You can always be honest to coaches. There might be times where it's not appropriate to be honest, because it might not work out in your favor. But even after the game, saying, hey, coach, back in the second period, I know I missed that trip. I just, at the time didn't feel like I had a great view of it. But after thinking about it and processing, I'm sorry, I missed that trip, but making sure you gauge on when it is appropriate to have those conversations. But if you truly missed a trip, you still got to stay to your standard. You got to, if you see another one that's similar, you still got to call it. You can't just be, oh, I missed that trip, I'm going to miss one on the next team. Because that's not what we want to get ourselves into.
Right. And Pete, we're not in the credit business, right? We're not going to miss one and then let one go on the other way. We're not doing that, right? Because that's going to create problems.
Right. And that's how games spiral out of control. We said at the beginning of the webinar here that if we don't make these calls, the game could spiral out of control, and then all of a sudden restraining fouls turn into aggressive physical fouls that we don't want. And that's what can happen in this scenario. And being able to, if you miss one and you call it on the other team, it's one of those things where you kind of just got to take a deep breath, because we all know it's coming, because the coach is going to say, the players are going to say, well, you just let the same thing go over there on the other side. And you need to be able to go over there to that bench in that scenario and say, you know what, coach, it's because I made a mistake, but I can't have two wrongs make a right. and I'm going to be better moving forward, but I still have to maintain the standard of tripping or hooking. And I have to call this penalty. I'm sorry I missed one, and I'll do better moving forward.
Oh, that's perfect. We have another question. We have a question from another question from the audience. And this is a really good one. What do you do when you see one player trip another player as retaliation or harassment behind the play? So it's away from the puck. Neither player has the puck. It's not around the puck, but it's more, a retaliation type harassment thing. What are we doing in that case? Are we making that call, Kaylen?
I think, it's really going to depend on the situation. I don't want to say you would or you wouldn't, because it's really going to come down to, what caused this to happen. Is it a retaliation? Was there something, did you see something happen, a couple shoves and there was an extra trip in the end? No, at that case, you might let some of those go. But if it is also one that could start to get those two players to be more confrontational, that also could be a time where you do call it. These are ones that can be really tough, and it does depend on each situation and, and how that transpires, because you want to make sure that you're getting the calls if you need to, but there's also times where if it's so far behind the play, you might be able to let that go.
Peter?
And the other option, the other tool we have in there, and I think the key word in this is, if it's for harassment, I'm probably calling a penalty. But if it's a retaliation, then as Kaylen mentioned, you have an opportunity to let it go, or you have an opportunity to stop play, take both players, and they can each both sit for 2 minutes and feel shame. So that's the other tool in the tool belt that we have in that scenario.
And
I think one thing we want to remember for the individual that asked the question, we're absolutely when it becomes a dangerous type of a play. So if it's a play like a slew foot, or you trip somebody, poke their legs out from behind, or something like that, we're always going to call something that involves danger, that involves safety. Safety is, there's never a time to say I'm choosing not to call a penalty that involves the safety of a player. So I think that's. I think that's something that's important. And yeah, another person just chimed in and said, verbalize to those players, let them know you're watching, right? That's part of your presence on the ice, guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my next thing. And I'm glad that he put that in there. Communicate with them, talk to them, say, hey, ladies, guys, I'm right here. Let's get the play going, keep going. And, they're most of the time, they're going to pick their head up and look at you. They're going to see that you're right there, because half the time they're kind of shocked that you're still right there next to them. So give them that, communication that I'm right here. Let's get going.
And the next piece here perfect. Too. Oh, sorry. And the next piece here too, especially I know because a lot of us are working 2-man system, and then some of us are creeping in the 3-man system. And if you're the referee, because I noticed this said it was behind play, and you obviously have to probably get to the other end of the ice to see a goal opportunity. It's a quick communication to your linesman that is standing right there saying, hey, can you take a look over my shoulder here and make sure these two players don't take it any further? Or if I need to get involved, let me know at the next stoppage. Being able to communicate with your team.
No, that's perfect. So no, I think that's great. And I think that's a really good place to kind of put a bow on this as we creep towards the top of the hour here. We've talked a lot about restraining fouls. We've talked about safety. We've talked about scoring opportunities, change of possession, all kind of the things. And Peter and Kaylen, I want to thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate the insight, and we very much appreciate you guys taking time out of your lives to join us this evening. So thank you very much for that. And as we do wrap up, I want to kind of let our audience know what are some of the things to look forward to in the next few Tuesdays. So next Tuesday, we're going to give you a rule change update. We have just completed, USA Hockey has just completed its annual meeting, or midwinter meetings, I should say, that have to do with all things revolving around USA Hockey. And part of that was the rules committee had its meeting. We are in a rules change year, and there are a number of rule change proposals that are going to be up for the board of directors to vote on when we get to annual Congress in June. So Matt Leaf and a couple of members of our playing rules committee are going to be here to talk about what you can look forward to, or what some of the rules change proposals are. The following week, I'll be back with 2 or 3 NHL officials. We're going to have Meet the NHL Officials. It's part of our Hockey Week Across America celebration. So we'll be doing some question and answer with some of our top American NHL officials. And then towards the end of February, we're going to do an episode on our summer development camps. We all have our fingers crossed that as we get into the springtime, we're going to be able to be hosting summer development camps this year and be able to roll those programs back out for all of our officials. So I believe BJ is going to be in the captain's chair that night talking about our summer camps. So those are the things to look forward to. And then we've got a whole bunch of exciting more stuff on the following Tuesdays after that. So once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time. Peter and Kaylen, thanks for your information. Wish you all a great Tuesday evening and the rest of your week. And we'll see you back here next Tuesday night. Thanks, everyone.